Imagine walking into a room, and without hearing a single word, you already know exactly what everyone is feeling. Who genuinely likes you, who secretly envies you, who's lying, and who's smiling on the outside while falling apart on the inside. Now imagine something even more powerful. What if you could do more than understand people's emotions? What if you could influence their decisions? An influence that can't be seen. A kind of power that people don't even realize is being used on them. This isn't magic. It's not a superpower. It's human psychology. And the truth is, your entire life has been unfolding inside these invisible psychological forces. Every advertisement that convinces you to buy something, every politician who knows how to ignite emotion, every leader whose single sentence changes the minds of thousands, they all understand one thing. Human beings are driven less by logic and far more by emotion. And the person who understands emotions understands behavior. The person who understands behavior understands decisions. And the person who understands decisions steps into the world of influence. But that raises a dangerous question. If this knowledge is so powerful, why weren't we taught it in school? Because knowledge itself is never dangerous. But when knowledge comes with power, it can rebuild the world or destroy it. A knife can cut fruit, or it can wound another human being. The knife isn't the problem. The hand holding it is. And psychology works the same way. What you're about to learn is used by world leaders, by billion-dollar brands, by great speakers, and sometimes by the very people you call toxic or manipulative. But this video isn't about controlling others. It's about revealing a truth that will make it impossible for you to see the world the same way again. Because here's the strange reality. Most people don't actually make their own decisions. They simply believe they do. Their preferences, their dislikes, their fears, their dreams are often shaped by forces they never even notice. And maybe, even right now, as you're watching this video, there are thoughts moving through your mind that never truly belonged to you. Think about it. How many things did you start liking simply because everyone else liked them? How many times did you accept someone's opinion because they spoke with confidence? How many decisions did you make simply because your emotions were overwhelming in that moment? Human beings love to think they're free, but in reality, they're often chained to their desires, their fears, their attention, and their emotions. And that's why psychology is so powerful. Because it doesn't try to change people. It simply understands what already exists inside them. Anger, attention, curiosity, pride, love, fear, the need to belong. These are the hidden doors of human nature. And anyone who learns how those doors work can influence human behavior in astonishing ways. But another question emerges. If every human being can be influenced so easily, does that include you? The answer is yes. Me too. You too. Everyone. Even the people who believe they're exceptionally intelligent, because intelligence doesn't protect us from bias. Most of the time, it simply gives us better arguments to defend it. And this is where the real journey begins. Before you can influence the minds of others, you must understand the hidden rooms inside your own, because the person who cannot read themselves will never truly read anyone else. And the person who remains a slave to their own emotions will never possess real influence. The first requirement of influence is self-mastery, because the most dangerous manipulators in the world aren't always the ones who control others. They're the ones who have complete control over themselves. And in the next few moments, you're about to discover a psychological truth that explains why people often do the very thing they're told not to do. A truth you've probably witnessed 1,000 times without ever stopping to think about it. And once you understand it, you'll realize something unsettling. The human mind doesn't always crave freedom. Sometimes it is irresistibly drawn toward the forbidden. And that is where the most fascinating game of human behavior truly begins. Let's try a quick experiment. For the next 10 seconds, don't think about a red monkey. Don't picture it. Don't imagine it. Try. What happened? The very thing you tried to push out of your mind became even more vivid. This is one of the strangest paradoxes of the human mind. The moment we're told not to think about something, our attention drifts straight toward it. In psychology, this is called psychological reactance. In simple terms, human beings are deeply attached to their sense of freedom. And the instant we feel that freedom is being restricted, a quiet rebellion begins inside us. That's why if you tell a child, "Don't press that button suddenly becomes the most fascinating object in the room. It's why if you tell a teenager, "You can't do this," they'll spend every ounce of energy trying to prove that they can. And it's also why the people who seem unavailable often become the most intriguing. There is something strangely magnetic about the forbidden. Why? Because the human mind associates scarcity with value. What is always available rarely feels precious. What is difficult to obtain feels valuable. This is why the world's greatest marketers don't simply sell products. They sell scarcity. Today only. Only a few left. Limited edition. And suddenly, people buy something they may not have needed at all. They didn't purchase the product. They purchased a feeling. The fear of missing out. That fear drives more human decisions than most people realize. And if you look back at your own life, you'll probably discover that some of your biggest decisions were made simply because you didn't want to miss an opportunity. But hidden inside this is a much deeper lesson. Psychology isn't only about influencing others, it's also about understanding yourself. Because when you understand how your mind reacts to restriction, you begin to recognize your own vulnerabilities, and self-awareness is the first step toward any form of mental freedom. Think about it. How many times have you resisted someone's advice simply because it sounded like an order? How many times have you rejected a good idea only because you felt someone was trying to control you? Human beings don't just want freedom, they want the feeling of freedom. That's why great leaders rarely force people. They make people feel as though the decision was their own. And this is where an entirely new world of influence begins. A world where people believe they are making independent choices, even though the choices in front of them were carefully designed from the beginning. Imagine a river flowing down from a mountain. It feels free. It believes it's choosing its own path. But if walls are built on both sides, the river can only flow where the channel allows. It still feels free, but someone else determined its direction. Human decisions often work the same way. We believe we're choosing with complete freedom, when in reality, the options placed before us have already defined the boundaries of our choices. And the person who learns how to shape those options can profoundly influence decisions without force, without arguments, without ever appearing to be in control. This is the point where many people begin to think psychology is some kind of magic. But it isn't. It's a map of human nature. And so far, you've opened only one door, because another powerful truth is waiting ahead, an emotional weapon, capable of making people do things they never intended to do, a feeling that quietly takes root in the heart, and then reshapes behaviors, relationships, and decisions. That feeling is guilt. Guilt, the silent emotion that changes people. Take a moment and go back through your life. Remember a time when you hurt someone, ignored a phone call, broke a promise, or disappointed someone who only wanted a little of your time and attention. What happened afterward? Maybe no one yelled at you. Maybe nobody even confronted you. And yet, something inside you became restless. You kept replaying the moment. You kept justifying yourself. You told yourself, "I've been busy. I didn't mean it that way. I'm not that kind of person." And that's the moment guilt begins its work. Because guilt isn't punishment. Guilt is a mirror that shows us two versions of ourselves. The person we believe we are, and the person we became in that moment. The distance between those two people is called guilt. That's why guilt is so powerful. It doesn't come from the outside, it rises from within. And anything that comes from within has a different kind of power. Psychology tells us that every human being carries a story about themselves. I'm a good person. I'm loyal. I care about others. But when our actions collide with that story, an internal conflict is born, and the mind desperately wants to resolve that conflict. That's why people apologize. That's why they explain themselves. That's why they try to prove they're not who their actions made them appear to be. They're not only trying to convince others, they're trying to become acceptable in their own reflection again. And this is why sometimes a quiet sentence is more powerful than 1,000 arguments. Imagine a friend who has ignored you for months. If you say angrily, "You never make time for me," their mind immediately goes on defense. They start explaining, defending, justifying. But if you quietly say, "I guess I wasn't as important in your life as I thought," something changes. Suddenly, the conversation shifts from accusation to emotion. The other person begins to see their behavior through your eyes. And often, that's the moment guilt wakes up. But there's an important lesson here. Guilt may be powerful, yet its misuse can poison relationships. Some people control others by making them feel perpetually guilty. They don't offer love. They offer obligation. They never say, "I want you in my life." Instead, they make you feel, "If you don't do what I want, you're a bad person." That isn't influence. That's emotional imprisonment. And many people spend years living inside that prison without realizing their decisions aren't coming from love at all. They're coming from guilt. That's why self-awareness matters. Ask yourself, why am I making this decision? Because I genuinely want to, or because I don't want to disappoint someone? That single question can break a lot of chains. Because the day you understand the true source of your emotions is the day you begin freeing yourself from unnecessary influence. But guilt is only one emotional force. There are others inside us that are even more powerful. Fear, hope, pride, love, anger. These are the emotions that can change a decision in seconds. A single moment of fear can destroy years of planning. A single moment of love can make someone attempt the impossible. And a single moment of anger can produce words that are regretted for a lifetime. This is why the world's greatest influencers don't begin by understanding people's thoughts. They begin by understanding their emotions. Because when emotions grow intense, logic slowly begins to fade into the background. And this is where one of the most fascinating and dangerous truths about the human mind begins. The moment when emotions temporarily take the driver's seat, and people make decisions that later leave even themselves in disbelief. Think back to a decision you made in the past, a decision that left you asking yourself, "Why did I do that?" Maybe you walked away from someone in anger. Maybe you trusted someone blindly because your emotions took over. Maybe you bought something you didn't need, or changed the entire course of your life in a single emotional moment. Then a few days passed. The emotions faded, and suddenly, you saw everything differently. Why? Because in that moment, you weren't making the decision. Your emotions were. Human beings like to think of themselves as rational creatures, but neuroscience tells a different story. First we feel, then the mind creates reasons to justify what we felt. We tell ourselves, "I thought this through." But more often the truth is, "I felt it first." and then I tried to prove that it made sense. This is called an emotional hijack. A moment when emotions grab the steering wheel and reason quietly moves to the back seat. Imagine walking through a forest. Suddenly something moves in the bushes. Your heart races. Your breathing changes. Your body prepares for danger. A few seconds later you realize it was only the wind, but your brain had already reacted, because the human mind's first priority isn't truth, it's survival. That's why fear is so powerful. That's why anger can be so blind. And that's why love often feels so irrational. Emotions help us make quick decisions, but sometimes that speed sends us in the wrong direction. And the world's most influential speakers, politicians, brands, and leaders understand this better than anyone. They don't always give you information. They give you a feeling of fear, a feeling of hope, a feeling of pride, a feeling of danger. And the moment you connect with that feeling, your mind slowly begins to think in the direction that feeling points. This is why people are often influenced not by a leader's words, but by the emotions those words create. We don't remember facts nearly as well as we remember feelings. You may not remember many days from your childhood, but you probably remember exactly how certain people made you feel. Someone made you feel small. Someone believed in you. Someone made you feel important. Emotions leave fingerprints on memory. And that's why our relationships, our decisions, even our identities are deeply tied to emotion. But this raises an important question. If emotions are so powerful, should we try to avoid them? No. The problem isn't emotion. The problem is that most of us become servants to our emotions before we even recognize them. A powerful person isn't someone who never feels anger. A powerful person is someone who refuses to make decisions while angry. A powerful person isn't someone who never feels fear. It's someone who can still think clearly in the middle of fear. That is self-mastery. That is mental freedom. And that is the line that separates ordinary people from extraordinary ones. So the next time you're furious, overjoyed, terrified, or overwhelmed by emotion, ask yourself one simple question. Is this my decision or my emotions? That single question can save you from dozens of life-changing mistakes. But the most fascinating secret of human psychology still lies ahead. A force that isn't anger, isn't fear, isn't love, and isn't even made of words. Yet sometimes it's more powerful than shouting. It changes relationships, wins arguments, pulls truth out of people, and sometimes a few seconds of silence can accomplish what hours of conversation never could. Because some forms of power don't live in sound. They hide inside silence.